Hey you guys, it's Moonlander, and this is my first horror book review. I originally started reading a trilogy, the Beast House trilogy, and I ended up hating it, and I found out there's a fourth book, and I just couldn't bring myself to buy and read another book out of this series, so I pretty much had to scrap that as my first book review. And yeah, it took quite a while to read those books. But anyway, so for my first one, I'll be doing a book called A Deadly Haunting. Now this is written by Joey Albrecht, and it's based on a true story by Deborah Moffat. I heard about this book on a podcast called Mysterious Radio, and they were interviewing this Deborah Moffat about her haunting experience. And it was so outlandish and incredible that I had to get the book. And I would definitely say the woman on the podcast while she was being interviewed sounded genuine enough, like to where you could possibly believe this really happened. So that definitely influenced me in my decision to buy this book. So this book was released in 2014, and out of 115 Amazon reviews, it's at a 3.9 out of 5-star rating, which I'd say is pretty good. And the top review is even by a guy that can vouch for the truthfulness of this book's contents. And it says, I was one of the psychic mediums called in by the Moffat family to attempt to clear the malicious entity. So anyway, this book starts off before Deborah Moffat was even in the picture of this family. It was her future husband and his parents and his grandparent, or his grandma, and they owned a set of 4 or 5 houses that were all by each other, like in a corner lot. The grandma was dying, and she had a housekeeper from the Dominican Republic, and she was in fear of having to return to her country once the grandmother died and she wouldn't have a job, is what you're led to believe. But anyway, she performs some Santeria ritual, and they think this is where this demon originated from. So obviously the ritual didn't work and the grandma died, and now all of these houses in this corner lot were supposedly haunted at one time or another, or all at once. Now the family rented a couple of the houses out, and the people that lived in them definitely experienced things. One, they even suspect the husband was caused to murder his wife. And in another one, a father had his adult son living with him, and when one of the Moffat family was walking by, they saw him in the backyard planting trees upside down. And when she confronted him about it, he had black eyes. So eventually, the son of this Moffat family marries this Deborah woman, and things only keep getting worse and worse. Eventually, they're not comfortable renting these houses because of these things that keep happening. And the haunting even takes place in the homes where they live. They find other people's wallets just suddenly appearing in their home, their watches, just any personal belongings. And they found it hard to explain themselves when returning these items. So anyway, the haunting gets so bad that they decide to sell all of these houses and to move into a really big house with the father and mother-in-law, the Deborah Moffat and her husband. and they all move into a really nice big new house, and they end up selling all of these houses, which you could find out that they sold to some Asian people, and I guess the next time they saw these homes they had been leveled. So anyway, once they move into their new home, they are followed by this demonic presence, and it greatly intensifies with its haunting. Now from here, you have, I think, about 5 years of them living with this thing bothering them. It communicates to them by writing on the mirror, and they can write on the mirror back. It focuses on the mother-in-law. It cuts up her clothes. It writes that she's gonna die in the mirror. It stabs knives in the bottom of her kitchen table chairs. Like, I mean, this thing is out to get this woman. And as you read the book, you find out why it's so focused on this woman and its involvement with other family members. And throughout this length and time where they're living in this home, putting up with all these things happening, they get anybody and everybody they can to come and try to cleanse their house. They get Native American shamans, they get all sorts of psychics and mediums, and they eventually get Ed and Lorraine Warren to even come to their house. Now this is a brief part of the book, but it is in the book, and so you get to read about what that was like and what they experienced when they came to this house. So the things I liked about this book is, for sure, I would definitely say this is an absolutely insane haunted house story. I have never even heard of anything close to this. It is like absolutely crazy. This thing kills one of their dogs by pushing it through a fence. It flings another one of their dogs in a swimming pool. I mean, it's absolutely terrible haunting. So it's full of entertaining parts. Like, the book's never really dull. At some parts it kind of tries to give you some insight into what their family and relationships were like. Those parts were pretty dull, but they're pretty sparse throughout the book, so it's definitely a page turner, and it never really gets boring. And it even includes some pictures. Now, there is a website for this book and even a YouTube channel that the Deborah Moffat has made. I don't really think the YouTube channel's all that worth checking out. She just kind of answers some questions and talks about parts of the book. But the website, you can see more pictures. And she says they had like 300 pictures of the damages that this demon did. And they even, throughout their time there, got rid of them. She only found these pictures after her husband passed away. And they had all made a pact not to talk about this haunting. And she only decided to try to get a book made once her husband and mother-in-law had died. And anyway, so they were advised to destroy pictures because they thought it would be like keeping the demon in their home by having these items, you know. But anyway, she found the box and had pictures in it, so that's what you can look at. And they show like writing on the mirror, a bed slashed up, and things like that. Okay, so the things I didn't like about this book is I would definitely say I didn't really care for the writing style. Now, this says it's a story based on a true story, and there's some parts in the book you would know that nobody witnessed and nobody could know, so they definitely had to make stuff up. And I found those parts really hard to swallow, and I didn't really care for how the writer did it. So this book, it should have been done in a way that it's scary because it's real, but the book's done in a way where it's a poorly written, scary story. And now I remember from the interview, she didn't really shop writers to write this book. She kind of just took the first writer that came up or, became available to her. And I think that might have been a mistake. But now she's written a book herself since then, and she says it's a factual book of exactly what happened there. So my final thoughts on this book is I wish that they had gotten a better writer and done this book in a little bit of a different way. But at the same time, it is a really entertaining read. And I will say, though, I think I did enjoy listening to the podcast more. You get to hear quite a bit about the haunting. And I don't know if I would have, and I'm sure hearing these things for the second time affected my feelings about how much I cared for the book. And I guess most important about a book like this is, do I believe this is true? And sadly, I have to say, no, I don't. I thought it might be possible to believe this one when I heard her interviewed, but I don't know if it's the way the book's written or what. I just really find this all hard to swallow. Maybe parts of it are true, but I really think the father-in-law may have been quite a bit more involved in these things than, the book leads you to believe. He's a bad guy, and if you read it, you'll see what I mean. But whether I believe this or not, I highly suggest at least listening to the podcast interview or just reading this book for anybody that's even slightly interested in the paranormal, because this is an absolutely insane haunting. It's just like over the top level stuff that happens. So anyway, you guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed my first book review. And then for my next one, I have Deliver Us from Evil, about this policeman that was also an exorcist. And they made a movie about him with Eric Bana, but I didn't really care too much for the movie, so I wanted to see how this book was. But anyway, I'll see you guys on the next one.